Simon James is an unremarkable, modest guy who is unable to stand up for his opinions or personal boundaries. Those around him often boss Simon around, taking advantage of his mild-mannered nature. Of course, he can't even dream of a woman paying attention to him. At times people simply ignore Simon, as if he doesn't exist at all. The security guard at the office where Simon has been working for 7 years demanded his pass and ID. Unfortunately, Simon couldn't provide the latter, as he had accidentally left his briefcase on the subway. When it comes to work, Simon's shyness has prevented him from building a career, despite his many interesting ideas and unrealized projects. But the deputy boss, Mr. Papadopoulos, seemed deaf to Simon. In fact, the man didn't even know Simon had been working there for 7 years, mistaking him for a new hire. As a result, Mr. Papadopoulos assigned Simon to train his daughter, Melanie, for an hour a day so she could also work in the office. The girl clearly didn't care about any of it. In general, Simon's voice remains unheard. For many years he's been in love with his colleague, Hannah, but she doesn't see him as a man. Simon looks for any excuse to see her every day. He never found the courage to offer to walk Hannah home. The only person in Simon's life is his elderly mother. The office policy is simple: there's only one boss, the colonel, while everyone else is just expected to do their jobs well. No one stands out. In the evening, Simon as usual visited his mother at the nursing home. The management had decided to raise the monthly fee. But Simon couldn't afford it, even if he gave them every penny he had. Simon lives alone in a modest apartment. His only forms of entertainment after work are watching TV and using a telescope to watch Hannah, who lives in the building across the street and loves to paint. Simon would give anything to be with her. But someone like Hannah would never notice someone like him. Seeing Hannah tear up yet another painting and throw it away, Simon immediately grabbed a stool and went to her garbage chute. He was caught by the janitor, who said it wasn't allowed. Later, Simon pieced together the fragments of Hannah's torn painting. To him there was nothing more beautiful. Looking through the telescope again, Simon saw a man with binoculars. They waved to each other. Suddenly the man jumped. The police arrived at the scene and took the body away. Detectives questioned Simon, who had witnessed the incident, and concluded that the man had taken such a desperate step because of loneliness. It was a common occurrence. The detectives asked Simon if he also had thoughts of harming himself. He nervously replied that he didn't. Hannah approached Simon and asked what had happened. He told her everything, mentioning how hard it was to be lonely. They went to a cafe together, where Simon regularly encounters rudeness from the staff. Nevertheless, he keeps coming back. Hannah's presence alone made him happy. He wanted to take her hand but couldn't summon the courage. Hannah admitted that the man who had ended his own life had started stalking her some time ago. He became obsessed with Hannah, showing up everywhere she went, whether at the office or on the subway. Naturally it scared her, though it mostly annoyed her. Yesterday Hannah yelled at him, demanding he stop following her. Perhaps this influenced his fatal decision. Simon said that was unlikely. The man was strange regardless. After sharing her worries with Simon, Hannah felt relieved and thanked him. Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Simon's mother, who kept repeating that he was a complete disappointment. When Simon returned to the table, Hannah was gone but had left a note saying they would see each other tomorrow at the Colonel's Ball, where all employees were required to attend. Playing Hannah's favorite song, Simon eagerly anticipated the moment. For the first time Hannah had spoken to him. He even sold his TV at a pawn shop to buy earrings for Hannah. Simon was filled with hope, believing his lonely life was finally over. He wanted to dance. Usually none of the employees ever have their passes checked at the entrance. None except for Simon, despite the fact that he has been working here for 7 years. Without a pass, he wasn't even allowed into a mandatory event. Simon was forced to watch through the peephole as others enjoyed themselves. Only Hannah looked sad. When a few employees opened the door to step outside for a smoke, they didn't even notice Simon, simply walking past him. Simon wanted to approach Hannah, but the security guard escorted him out, even though the guard sees Simon every day and undoubtedly knows him by face. Even when Simon yelled, his words were met with no reaction. Simon is angry at the world, where he feels like an empty space. If Simon ceased to exist, no one would even notice. The next day at work, Simon hurried to explain himself to Hannah, but they ended up just riding the elevator in silence, smiling at each other. Before Hannah left, Simon mentioned that he had bought her a gift but decided it wasn't the right moment to give it to her. Simon tried to figure out why his pass wasn't valid. But for some reason no one took him seriously. Moreover, everyone reminded Simon how he was disgracefully dragged out of the ball in front of Hannah the night before. Mr. Papadopoulos introduced a new employee to the team, James Simon. Seeing his double, Simon fainted from stress. For some reason no one else noticed their striking resemblance. In the restroom, the doubles crossed paths. Simon didn't understand what was happening and approached his colleague, Harris, asking if James reminded him of anyone. Harris replied without hesitation that he didn't. Simon asked him to take a closer look, but Harris still stubbornly denied noticing any similarity. Later, the doubles ran into each other again in the elevator. James definitely didn't seem as timid as Simon, who couldn't take his eyes off his copy. They went to grab a bite together at the cafe. As usual, Simon mumbled, enduring the waitress's rudeness. But James wasn't about to tolerate such treatment, and the waitress was exceedingly polite to him. James exuded confidence, something Simon had never been capable of. Even though the two men looked absolutely identical, James, unlike Simon, was successful with women. At the nightclub where they hung out, he could choose anyone. Simon unwillingly got into a conflict with a drunk man, but James easily handled the situation. He did whatever he wanted, never feeling the need to explain himself to anyone. Later, James asked Simon if he had a girlfriend. Simon admitted that there was a girl he was in love with, but he was too shy to confess his feelings. James told him that you have to go after what you want. Doing nothing wouldn't help. Simon understood that, but couldn't help himself. He felt like he wasn't living his own life. And Simon had no one to talk to about it. James got so bored that he fell asleep right on the metro. Simon brought a drunk James to his home. Simon wished he could be more like him. Maybe then Hannah would see Simon as a man. The next day, for the first time, no one asked Simon to show his pass, simply because he came in with James. Simon didn't like that James was shifting his work onto him, taking advantage of their resemblance. Being obliging as always, Simon even had to take a competency test for James. James quickly integrated into the team, finding common ground with every employee, even with Mr. Papadopoulos' gloomy daughter, Melanie. While Simon dealt with routine tasks, James continued to impress Melanie with his sweet talk. Simon received the highest score on the test, but of course Mr. Papadopoulos was convinced it was James and praised him for his excellent performance. Forced to work for two, Simon didn't miss a chance to see Hannah. Later, James advised him to ignore Hannah for a few days to pique her interest. Simon thought it was rude but followed the advice, and it worked. Hannah approached him herself and invited him to a cafe. However, during the so-called date, all Hannah did was talk about James. She had never met anyone like him. James continues giving Simon advice on how to behave with women to impress them. But Simon isn't sure he has the audacity for that. The next time he went on a date with Hannah pretending to be James, otherwise she wouldn't have agreed. Simon quickly lost all his resolve and couldn't utter a single word. To save the crumbling date, James suggested they switch places. Hannah was just about to leave, but James went after her. She was furious and upset, but, thanks to James's boldness, her anger quickly turned into something else, passion. They kissed in front of shocked Simon. The entire restaurant applauded them. The waiter handed utterly devastated Simon the bill. He feels betrayed and left out. The next day he saw a happy Hannah at work. She wasn't on the metro that morning, so it was obvious her date with James had continued. The girl merely smiled mysteriously. Simon was about to present his project plan to his boss, but James took credit for it. Mr. Papadopoulos declared it brilliant. At the same time he scolded Simon for being lazy and advised him to take James as an example. Simon feels that James has stolen his life. Other than his mother, Simon still has no one. The staff at the nursing home are careless toward the patients, but Simon lacks the courage to voice his dissatisfaction. Later, Simon watched through a telescope as James and Hannah indulged in passion. It seems Hannah is crazy about this guy, while the one who truly loves her is forced to remain a silent observer. However, unlike soft-hearted Simon, James is interested in other women as well, which hurts Hannah. Simon told James to stop tormenting Hannah, but James just smirked. Moreover, he began blackmailing Simon, threatening to slander him to Papadopoulos, who would undoubtedly believe James over the quiet, insecure guy. James also demanded that Simon give him the keys to his apartment so that he could meet with various women there. Simon had no choice but to comply. Now he can't even control his own apartment. Nevertheless, Simon doesn't give up on the idea of impressing Papadopoulos, but James has entirely different plans. Simon no longer wants to give his apartment keys to his double or do all the work for him. Once again, James used blackmail to get what he wanted. Later, Hannah approached Simon, suspecting that James was cheating on her. She was going mad with jealousy. Simon told her that she shouldn't continue seeing James because she was clearly obsessed with him. Hannah didn't like those words. Simon is invisible, and no matter what he does, his life doesn't change. One late evening, Hannah caught him rummaging through her trash chute. Simon assured her he meant no harm. Together they saw James entering Simon's apartment with some woman. James has completely taken control of Simon, who can no longer even enter his own home. James plays by his own rules without a shred of remorse. Soon Simon was summoned to HR and told that he wasn't in the company's database, meaning he didn't exist and could no longer work there. Simon had no response to that. As he left, he learned that James had once again taken credit for his ideas. The entire team adores James, deliberately ignoring Simon, his exact look-alike. Simon tried to expose James in front of everyone, but Papadopoulos refused to listen. As the security guard escorted Simon out, he shouted that he existed, but his voice remained unheard. Simon decided to leave this meaningless life behind. He was already a ghost, so nothing would change. But when he saw Hannah unconscious through the telescope, Simon changed his plans. Hannah, who had tried to harm herself, ended up in the hospital. The doctor, who looked just like the security guard, asked Simon a few questions, but there was little he could provide. It turned out Hannah had lost her baby. When she was discharged, Simon made sure she got home safely. Hannah felt no gratitude toward him because she didn't want to be saved. Perhaps she would never attempt such a thing again. Hannah fell into a deep depression. Simon quietly left her a gift, earrings and a scrapbook with her restored drawings. At that moment Hannah realized that the one who truly loved her had always been by her side. Simon learned that his mother had passed away that morning. For some reason the funeral was held at midnight. Simon rushed there and saw James among the attendees. A fight broke out between them. The injuries one sustained appeared on the other as well. In the end the priest grabbed a shovel and ran at Simon, pushing him into the grave. When Simon regained consciousness, everyone was gone. He rushed to Hannah, looking more determined than ever. Even the janitor mistook him for James. Simon told Hannah that he would no longer be a puppet, then walked away. Hannah watched him through the window. Taking advantage of the fact that his double was asleep, Simon handcuffed James's hands and after calling the police, began injuring himself. The same injuries appeared on James, who woke up in the process. Simon then stood in the same spot as the man who had once pursued Hannah. The double managed to free himself and watched from the window. Waving at him, Simon stepped off the ledge, but he had calculated everything beforehand and landed on an awning. Hannah, who also witnessed this, ran to injured Simon. The ambulance arrived quickly, but no one knew that James lay in Simon's apartment with identical injuries. Hannah accompanied Simon in the ambulance. He was saved, while James received no medical attention. The colonel, who was also present, remarked that Simon was a rare kind of person. Smiling, Simon replied that he wanted to believe that. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.